Well, good afternoon. It's great to be here in St. Petersburg again. We got a number of folks that have joined us. I have Senator Galvano and Representative DeSigli from here in Pinellas County. Thanks, Nick, and thanks, Bill, for what you've done. I got John Vasquez, Suncoast Police Benevolent Association. And then we got a lot of folks associated with the hotel and lodging and restaurant industry. Danette Lynch, Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association, Mary Beth Hansen, owner of Paradise Grill, J.T. Corrales, Operations Director for Krabby Bill's, Eric Potts, General Manager, Bella's Italian, Heather Dawkins, Senior Manager, The Canopy at Birchwood. So thank you all for coming. I have an announcement today, but before I do that, I just want to make some comments. We had a big unveiling of some proposed legislation on Monday in terms of maintaining law and order, public safety, and supporting the men and women who wear the uniform. And part of the reason we did that is some of the activity we see throughout the country. What we saw here in St. Petersburg the other night with mobs harassing innocent people who were just enjoying a meal at a restaurant is simply unacceptable. If you go out here in the state of Florida and you're sitting in a restaurant, you should be able to do that in peace without having some lunatic come up and yell in your face. I think that should be dealt with anyways, but our legislation will certainly do that. It's simply unacceptable to allow that type of behavior here in the state of Florida. And so for those law-abiding men and women who just want to live their lives, we got your back. More help is on the way. Today's announcement is something that we discussed a little bit yesterday. We had a Zoom roundtable with some real esteemed scientists from Stanford Medical School and Harvard Medical School, discussing a whole range of issues about the COVID-19 pandemic, but also specifically some of the mitigation measures in terms of businesses that have been done. In the state of Florida, we probably are the most open big state in the country. I mean, if you look, we've had theme parks operating for many months. Of course, the beaches, hotels, restaurants. We had some places in the Panhandle that had record summers. Other places did well. Some other places were a little slower, partially because of local restrictions. Some of them just from the natural lag in tourism that we've seen. But I think we've been able to put a lot of people back to work over the last few months. And then obviously have more to do. So today we have a lot of folks from the restaurant industry. They've been working very hard, have had operating under 50% capacity indoors. They've been doing a lot outdoors, but in Florida over the summer, that's not always the easiest. That will get a little bit better going forward as the weather cools. But in the state of Florida, we are today moving into what we initially called Phase 3. And what that'll mean for the restaurants is that there will not be limitations from the state of Florida. And in fact, we're also cognizant about the need for business certainty. There have been some local closures and other types of restrictions. And so the order that I'm signing today will guarantee restaurants operate, will not allow closures. They can operate at a minimum of 50% regardless of local rule. And then if the local restricts between 50 and 100, they've got to provide the justification and they've got to identify what the costs are involved with doing that are. And I think that that's important. This is a very difficult industry to succeed in. The margins aren't great. And if you go back to March, we were told 15 days to slow the spread. So that was, in Florida, we followed that. It was no dining restaurants, the bars, the gyms, no elective procedures, some of these things. And then they said, well, you know what, we need another 30 days. So 30 days to slow the spread. So we did that as well. And yet you have some people say, well, you can never do full what you want to do until there's a vaccine. Well, we don't know, hopefully. But now people are saying, hey, even if there's a vaccine, it's still going to take another year before you can operate appropriately. And I don't think that's viable. I don't think that is acceptable. And so I think that this will be very, very important to the industry. And it also will be a recognition that they have worked as hard as anybody to create safe environments. In fact, the idea that government dictating this is better than them making these decisions so that their customers have confidence, I think is misplaced. And I've gone to many restaurants over the last many months, and they take this obligation seriously. They want customers to have confidence, and so they have every incentive to want to do that going forward. We're also saying in the state of Florida, everybody has an opportunity and the right to work. Every business has the right to operate. You know, some of the locals may be able to, they can do reasonable regulations, but you can't just say no. You can't say no after 6 months and just have people twisting in the wind. And so I think that that's another important principle. If you looked at what we did yesterday and listened to some of those experts, it's pretty clear that we use our resources best when we focus them on the people that are most vulnerable to COVID-19. And I think that that's readily apparent that that's the elderly population. CDC recently revised and put out a new best estimate for the fatality rate for infections, an estimation, not cases, because there are way more infections than documented cases. And here's what they have. So if you look under 20, the survival rate, if you're infected with COVID-19, according to CDC, is 99.997%. If you're between 20 and 49, the survival rate is 99.98%. So under 50, that is less than seasonal influenza in terms of the severity. Now, when you get to 50 or 69, 99.5%, that's more severe than seasonal influenza. It's probably real severe, probably akin to a real severe flu. And then, of course, 70 plus, 94.6% survival rate. That is really, really significant. And that is where most of the hospitalizations and the mortality have come. And so those experts agreed, and we've always tried to do this in Florida, and we're going to continue. But our focus is really going to be on those folks who are most at risk. Part of that is what we're doing with long-term care and nursing homes, but really it goes beyond that into the broader senior community. We're going to be able to do more things with some of the new testing that's come out. But then, of course, also knowing your risk and being able to govern yourself accordingly, which many folks in that age group have done a really good job of in Florida over the last many months. So that's what we're looking at. So rather than trying to close things, what you want to do is have an age-specific strategy that really focuses on mitigating exposures and mitigating infections from the people that are the most at risk for this. And so if you take a step back and look at where Florida is in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, from July, at the beginning of July was the peak of infections. The ED visits peaked between July 7th and July 14th, kind of a plateau, and then it's kind of gone down ever since. The hospitalizations peaked on July 21st. So that's over 2 months ago. And what have we seen since the third week of July? We've actually seen more economic activity, more interaction, schools have opened, all the theme parks are open, more people have visited, and what has happened with hospitalizations? COVID-positive hospitalizations are down 76% since the July peak. ICU hospitalizations are down 72% since the July peak. Daily admissions for people getting admitted for either confirmed or suspected COVID has declined by 81% since that mid-July peak. And the ED visits for COVID-like illness are down close to 80% as well. Here in Pinellas County, I think in many ways Pinellas saw the increase hit before some of the other parts of the state, and they've definitely seen the decline go down quicker than many other parts of the state. The number of tests, the percentage of tests that come back positive in Pinellas County has been below 4% for 2 weeks. And if you know anything about these PCR tests, at least 1% are probably just false positives. Some of the other ones, if the people aren't symptomatic, may be picking up dead virus. That's a very low number for Pinellas County. Hospitalizations in Pinellas County have decreased by 79% since the July peak, and daily admissions to the hospital in Pinellas have declined by 82% since the peak. individuals showing up for the ER to the ED with COVID-like symptoms has decreased by more than 80% since the first week of July. And so I think what we've seen is we've been able to put more people back to work. All these indicators have gone down since July. You know, the end of June and July, were tough, not only for Florida, but through across the Sun Belt. But you've seen steady progress going in this direction. And so we need everyone to be able to go to work. We need people to be able to be in school. We have over 1.1 million students who are in person having instruction. We've had schools open since at least August 11th in parts of the state, and certainly at least a month almost every place in the state except southern Florida, although Palm Beach County is open for in-person, and Broward and Miami-Dade are going to start soon. So that's very important. Our universities have people that are in person, the students. That's important to do. We have college sports, we have high school sports, of course the NFL, with fans in most parts of the state, which I think is great. So I'm glad to be able to stand with some folks here who've been working very hard under very difficult circumstances. I think that I'm going to have a couple of them come up who want to say some stuff, but I think this will be, really significant for them in terms of the way forward here. So. Is anyone who wants to come up and talk about anyone from the restaurant? Go ahead. Sure. Yep.
Well, first of all, I'd like to commend Governor DeSantis for his leadership throughout this pandemic. I've said multiple times to friends and family how truly grateful I am that he's the steward of our state. Today is a big step for us as restaurateurs in the road to recovery. We employ almost 500 people pre-pandemic, so it's been a long road, but we're working hard to get back on. And I think that this gives us a real fighting chance. So I'm very grateful for you and just grateful that we had the opportunity to be here and see this through.
Can you tell them about your restaurant, where you're located?
Yeah, so we're a 38-year-old business located down on Indian Rocks Beach. We have multiple other locations along the coastline and a few inland. So we were very exposed at the beginning of this pandemic, and we're fortunate to be where we are today, and we still got a long way to go, but this is a very big step in the right direction.
It's Krabby Bill's.
Yeah, it's Krabby Bill's, Indian Rocks Beach.
What's your name? I'm sorry. Tell us your name.
My name is JT Corrales. I'm the Director of Business Development.
Well, Governor, echoing JT there, I want to thank on behalf of the industry, number one, you recognizing how hard they've worked to stay in business. There's probably never been a more challenging time for our restaurants and our hotels, not only the owners, all the workers, and you've just created a lot more jobs today, too, that I think certainly needs to be recognized. But the opportunity for us as patrons, we hope and encourage that we'll have people going out even more now. And we thank you very much for all that you've done for both the restaurants and the lodging.
Bill?
Thank you, Governor. And Governor, thank you for your great leadership, first in terms of protecting and supporting law and order and law enforcement. And I really appreciate the measured approach that you've taken with the economy and the business community as we've navigated this pandemic, and I appreciate the business leaders standing here with us. What I'd like to share with you all today is because of these decisions and the measured approach, starting at the plaza level, the governor's office, and then through the legislature, we saw our revenue collections for the state of Florida, our August collections, and they were $177 million over post-pandemic estimate. So we are already on the path to recovery, and what the governor is doing here today is just going to continue that path and perhaps accelerate it. So it's my pleasure to be here with all of you, and again, thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is John Vasquez, President of Suncoast Police Benevolent Association. Just want to make it clear that Suncoast Police Benevolent Association and its members, the men and women in uniform, wholeheartedly support the right for peaceful protest. That's what we're here to protect the Constitution for those men and women. We appreciate and we need laws passed to help protect the men and women in uniform, to help protect those civilians who choose to peacefully protest. Thank you, Governor, for everything that you've done for us.
Okay. Another thing that we're going to be doing going forward, in addition to really focusing on protecting elderly and as more means become available to do that, is focusing on some of the other health impacts of the pandemic. And they are legion. I think we had a good discussion of it yesterday with some of the experts. We know that there was a huge decline in ED visits for heart and stroke and some very common ailments. We suspect that that's already probably led to some excess mortality. Unfortunately, these are folks who were fearful of going to the hospital, maybe thought that the hospitals didn't have capacity, which was never true. But I think that there was narratives put out about that. And I've spoken with physicians around the state where they have people in ICU for heart who, if they had gone in earlier, would never have reached that stage. So we want to be discussing that. We also want to be discussing the importance of getting things like cancer screenings. The cancer missed screenings is not going to show up today, next month, may not even show up next year, but you can bet it's going to start showing up if this continues several years into the future. So very, very important. Also, immunizations for children. When the pandemic hit and the fear factor reached its zenith in March, you started to see a big decline in parents who were taking their children to be vaccinated. And we see this COVID chart. COVID is less dangerous for young kids than seasonal influenza, and certainly much dangerous than other diseases that they have good vaccinations for. So we definitely want to get the message out for folks to start doing that. Also, mental health. There was a CDC study that was cited by, I think, Dr. Bhattacharya from Stanford yesterday, where I think it was between 18 and 24, 25% of our folks between 18 and 24 reported having depression or some signs of mental health problems. That is a huge issue that needs to be combated. We've worked also already, and we're going to do more. There was a lot of progress that had been made on some of the drug abuse, like opioids. I think that's probably progress that was erased starting in March, and so we're probably back to where we were and need to start working forward. But I do think that the more society is functioning, the more people that have jobs, the more businesses that can succeed, the more opportunities for parents to send their kids to school. I think a lot of those other things become easier to deal with. But let's not make any mistake about it. Focusing on only one pathogen without all these other things is not an effective public health strategy. With that, take some questions.
Governor, how does this transition in phases affect other industries outside of the hospitality and restaurants?
It really doesn't very much because we've had everything open. There may be some local restrictions in some parts of southern Florida about doing some of the, like a banquet hall or something. And again, what the order is going to say, they have a right to operate. You can insist on certain regulations, and obviously I think you're probably going to see a different approach in southern Florida than you will in the Panhandle on some of that, and I think that that's fine. But I think everything has been open before this order. This just allows the restaurants to really be able to do this, I think, in a way that makes, I was in Dunedin with a guy that owns this small restaurant. It's more of an upscale deal. You walk in, it's just a room with seats. And it's like, he doesn't get enough traffic to really do half, but you could fill it, and it's not like it's really crowded. I mean, it's fine. And so some of these things, I think, were a little too mechanical. They have every incentive to provide a good environment for their customers, and there's going to be some customers that they want to do outdoor, to provide a safe outdoor. Maybe they'll do indoor as long as they have precautions that they think. And I think that's the best way to do it. But it's not really a one-size-fits-all, because I went into some restaurants where they're following the rules, but quite frankly, it didn't make sense. They could have done more without really causing any type of major difference in terms of any type of a transmission.
Governor, how are large venues like Bucks games, Rays games, how are they impacted by phase 3?
Well, they're not really impacted because I've supported that. And it's not a question of really government. It's really what the leagues have been comfortable with. I very much support the Bucks having fans. I think what the Dolphins did to start off, I think, was really great. The Jags, it's interesting, the Jags, they're allowing fans, they couldn't even sell out limited capacity, partially because I think some of the fans are concerned with some of the things that we've been seeing come out of the league. But so they can operate. Now, I fully understand, and we will work with them. They want to go slower more than anyone. So it's not like they want to have full capacity. But I think you can do much more than what's been done. Outdoor transmission has just not been a major factor. Doesn't mean it can't happen, doesn't mean there aren't things that you can think about in some of these venues, but I'd like to see everyone have fans at some capacity, and then let's build going forward. One of the reasons I really wanted to have the Buck, well, two reasons. One, Tom's the quarterback. Everyone wants to watch Tom Brady and Gronk and all these great players, and I'll tell you what, and I don't know how much football I'm going to watch this year, but I definitely watched on Sunday. I mean, I'm going to keep watching them. And so I think people wanted to be there, which is good. But I also want to be able to show we're going to be able to host the Super Bowl in February. We expect to do a full Super Bowl, and we're going to show that we're going to be able to do that. I think they can still do that, and I know there's some issues about insurance and all these other things, and I respect that, and maybe we'll address that after the election here in Florida with the new legislature. But yeah, I think it's important. I also think, we have musicians, they should be able to play, and they should be able to do some of this stuff, particularly on these outdoor venues. You can do it safely. Again, right to work, that's uniform now in Florida. And so some of these people, we want to make sure they have an opportunity. I know some have been doing it, but I've had some folks ask me about certain restrictions. We didn't really have restrictions, but I think people were just concerned. I think you can get to yes on all this stuff. And there's certainly no legal prohibition for them doing fans. Yes, sir.
Do you have any concerns that complete reopening will lead to another restriction?
So here's what I think. We've had way more activity over the last 2 months than we did over the prior two. We've seen big declines. At the same time, this is a virus that has confounded a lot of people. We're prepared if we see an increase. We're not closing anything going forward. But I think if you look at our hospital capacity, if you look at what we did to marshal the latest medications, if you look at what we've done to help with all the PPE and the testing and everything, we have the tools in place that we need. Is there going to be a true second wave? Understand, the Northeast wave was March and April. That was not our wave. Our Sun Belt all went in the June, July. And if you look at the epidemic curves from Los Angeles, Arizona, Texas, Florida, Georgia, it's almost the same basic curve. Arizona is a little bit higher than us in terms of per capita mortality. Georgia, Florida, Texas, pretty close. There were all different reopenings, different policies. And so, and then Los Angeles, obviously, they were one of the most restrictive of any place, and they basically had the similar thing that we had to deal with. So I think we're ready to deal with it. But the question is has there been a second wave anywhere? I think we should prepare for that, but there has not yet been. What you see in Europe is a lot of cases, very few hospitalizations, but in the areas that you're seeing it, those are areas that weren't really affected the first time. So we'll be ready for it. I think people should still understand that the virus, it doesn't go away. I mean, even if you have a vaccine, it doesn't go away because the chance of the vaccine being 100% effective is very small. So it's going to be at a minimum endemic. And so that's why I think it's so important, to focus on the risk to the folks who are especially vulnerable for this. That's going to continue to be an issue. We're going to continue to be supporting our long-term care and nursing homes. And then also some of the things. So yesterday I was with the president, and anytime you get near him, they make you do a test. And I say, I'm not symptomatic. I don't need to do it, but they make you do it. Well, there's a new Abbott test that's like a card. You could actually put it in your pocket, open it up. They do some swab, and it's an antigen test, 15 minutes. They're producing millions and millions and millions of those a week. So that gives us an opportunity to say, okay, it's been the case where if you have a 20-year-old grandkid, you may not have wanted them if you're 80 years old, although many of the seniors do. I mean, it's interesting. When we did the visitation for the nursing homes, everyone was so happy because it's like, some of these folks were telling us, I want to live to see my family. And when some of the family members came with the PPE and the mask, some of the residents said, take off your mask, I want to see you smile. So sometimes we think we know what folks want and that they're all so fearful of this. I think people have taken proper precautions, but I think a lot of people really want to be able to live. So, but we have the ability, though, if you want, you could potentially have these 15-minute tests for younger people who are going to visit older relatives, and really try to use the resources to make sure that the folks who are older can do as much as possible with protections. And so I think we're in a much better position now than we were in March and April, but I think we're even in a better position June. I mean, we built up what we needed to do. We never had hospital capacity overrun or anything like that. We were prepared. Right now, if you look at our hospital capacity, I think we have 24% of all beds are empty and 23% of ICU beds are empty. That's actually not a good thing for hospitals. They want to run these at higher capacity than that. That's much more empty beds than before the pandemic began. Part of that, I think, is just the lagging willingness of people to go in and to seek the treatment they need. So we do want people to go in and do that. But I asked those experts, so we had Martin Kaldor from Harvard Medical School, Jay Bhattacharya from Stanford, Mike Levitt from Stanford, who's a Nobel Prize winner, and I said, do you have any concern about hospital overrun, having watched this virus in different continents, different countries, and different U.S. states? Do you think it will overwhelm the medical system? They all said no, no, and no. And remember, when we did the 15 days to slow the spread, the whole reason was to buy time so that the hospitals weren't overwhelmed, which obviously would be bad for corona patients, but also all the other patients. And so I think the U.S. as a whole has clearly succeeded in doing that. I think our hospital system is completely capable of handling it. In fact, if anything, the hospital needs more patients and some of these other reasons, and some of the other health reasons to be able to go. So, but I would just tell people, the fact that you continue to move forward with the economy, it doesn't mean that the virus disappears. And so people should just understand it's something that we're going to have to deal with. But just as all those experts said yesterday when we had our thing, doing that from a fetal position where society flounders, people are out of work, kids aren't in school, that is not going to work, and that's not the way forward for us. So I don't address it directly. Actually, it's a good point. So what I did do in there is, just as an act of executive grace, all outstanding fines and penalties that have been applied against individuals are suspended. I think we need to get away from trying to penalize people for social distancing and just work with people constructively, put out what you want. But to impose some type of penalty of either, some actually have jail sentences attached. I don't know if that's actually been done, but I looked at some of those. But all these fines we're going to hold in abeyance and hope that we can move forward in a way that's more collaborative.
So it's reopening right now. It's start the moment that we
So, yeah, it's effective immediately.
And to be clear, it's full phase 3.
Phase 3.
Full phase
Yeah.
3.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that's a little bit different from what they had was, because there have been some issues with these bars, what we said to the locals on that is, okay, the bars are status quo from what we have. If you want to go beyond the 50, you can authorize it and do it. We're not telling you have to, but we're not going to stand in the way of that. So that'll be a local decision if they want to try to do more capacity in some of the bars and pubs. And I'd imagine that you will see a difference of opinion on how that shakes out in different parts of the state. And I think that working together on that makes a lot of sense.
The video you saw from downstairs, obviously that upset you. How do you envision law enforcement responding to those types of things?
So what I think is, and as was said, you'll go out and protest until your heart's content. It's your right to stand for what you want. No one is going to begrudge that, even though, I mean, quite frankly, some of the stuff that's said in these protests about the people in uniform I find revolting. I don't agree with it. But nevertheless, that's what the country's all about, to be able to go up there and do that. The minute that crosses over from just peaceful assembly to where you're harassing somebody else or you're intimidating or threatening them, particularly when they're in a public accommodation like a restaurant, or if they're in their residence. I mean, some of these places in like Oregon, you're starting to see some of these groups go into neighborhoods. That is unacceptable. We're not going to allow it. And I think when we did our press conference on Monday, Sheriff Judd in Polk County, pretty plain spoken, he said, sign of a peaceful protest, this is what this is. We all know it. This is not. This is when you cross the line. And I think crossing the line is really when you start harassing or intimidating just private citizens who are trying to go about their business. I looked at those folks. A meal. Who knows what's on their mind? Who knows what issues they're having to deal with in their life? And then to have a bunch of people do that, I think it's just unacceptable. That's not the way of life here in Florida. I don't think that that's conducive to having a safe society, and we just can't allow that to happen. So I was disappointed in seeing it. We actually, I mean, once we saw that, we had state resources. We were ready to marshal, and we didn't need to do that, fortunately. But man, it's not a good look for the state. It was not fair to those people who were sitting there just eating. And you really want to live in a society where anytime you venture into public, you can have somebody just come and do that to you. I don't want that. I don't think that that's right.
Governor, did you see the photograph of them giving the protesters the middle finger?
I did not.
Last question.
Oh, Governor, I have a question. And it states, it says Rick Wilson is dealing with the election. Rick Wilson is a legal project is claiming that Governor DeSantis has a plan to call the legislature into session after the election and change the winner of Florida if it appears close or Biden appears to win. Is that true?
Who is that?
I guess Rick Wilson of the Lincoln Project.
Yeah,
That you might.
I don't know who that is, and I think that that's just people putting out a scuttlebutt or, probably someone trying to grift off something. So, okay, well, thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.
Governor, what states